conventional economics today, but what I'm going to go over next is just kind of the last few bits of chapter 3 with kind of shifting the curves around. So remove your phones if you haven't done so, shut them off. I'll have to do the same here. All right. So we'll start off with what I call home base. So one of the things you want to do with any problem, so let's say you're asked a problem where average incomes increase. You know, what's the impact of the market? And you're kind of clueless, right? You're like, I'm just going to leave the page blank. Don't leave the page blank. Just put up at least home base. Home base is this. Draw a graph with an upward sloping supply curve and a downward sloping demand curve. Quantity on the horizontal axis, price up here. Where the two lines intersect, we have an equilibrium price. Let's call it P1 and Q1. All problems start this way. There's always some starting place, right? There's some price that's going on in the market. So I call this home base because you can just memorize it and that's where you'd start a problem. You might screw up the rest of it, but you'll get partial credit for at least getting something down. So then we get into the details of the problem a little bit more. And so maybe it's the demand for grain. So this is the grain market. So something about the problem says grain. So let's do a little example. Suppose the average income of Guatemalans increases. What is the effect on the grain market? So we're talking about kind of the basics of grain. We can get into making breads and other things. And so now from the problem you can see, oh, we're talking about grain, so this must be grains here. So this is the grain market. And this is the quantity of grain exchange and the price of the grain exchange. And so now, hopefully you've got all those shifters memorized as well. So we had demand shifters and supply shifters. What's going to happen if the average income of Guatemalans increases? What do you think? Demand or supply? Let's start with that. What do you think it's going to impact? Demand or supply? Simon? Demand. Good. And what is the shifter from our shifter list? This is where you look back in your notes to look at the demand shifter list if you don't have them memorized. So what are all of the demand shifters? Everybody say one. Just shout it out. Income. Somebody else give me another one. Price of related goods. Population. Expectations. Preferences. And demographic changes. So those are the things that can make the demand move off of the current price of where it is. So an increase in income would affect demand, shifting demand to the right or to the left. To the right, assuming it's a normal good. So there are two cases, but most goods are normal goods. So you'll see like ramen noodles, or if I threw something like that at you, it would probably be obvious somehow, or I would say, suppose grain is an inferior good and income increases or something like that, so that you guys knew that. So most goods are normal goods, and so we'd expect an increase to the right. So now, what's your prediction on price? What's going to happen to grain prices in Guatemala? They're going to go up, right? So now we're starting to use this tool as a predictive device here, because as the demand curve shifts to the right at the new levels of income, let's call it D2 and D1, At the old price, we have a disequilibrium now. So at the old price of grain, there's an excess demand, which is going to drive prices up to the new equilibrium. Prices are going to climb to P2, and grain production and consumption is going to rise. All right, so what is the effect on the grain market? There's going to be an increase in price, so an increase in demand leads to an increase in the equilibrium price and an increase in quantity. All right, so any questions there? All right, so I think I'll leave it at that. I wanted to use Guatemala because I'm going there Saturday with the international group, so we got students going. And then this is totally unrelated, but I don't want to forget to show you guys this. These just came in and I think they look pretty awesome. So this is what you can earn by coming to 6 Gortney Institute events. You can become a Gortney Scholar, and then we have this. We're going to be honoring, I think, 4 students, at least 3 or 4 students at the spring convocation that have come to our events. So one of the events can be like the debate night that we had. That's kind of what we call our introductory event, but then you have to participate in 5 other events. Like we had our colloquium reading group, a couple of you were in here for that. And so you get a little more in depth with reading. So we have book clubs and colloquiums, and we're sending students to Creighton University for a special event. We have 3 students going to that. So we have a number of things to keep your eyes out. So if any of you have any questions about becoming a Gortney Institute Scholar, looks great on a resume and shows that you did some extra stuff outside of class. And we also pay for the more intense events. So usually a $50 or $100 honorarium through our generous support from places like the Menard family. Save big money at Menards. You guys know that big store? Well, they are big donors to the Gortney Institute, as well as the Bradley Foundation this year. So they make these things possible. So I will feel free to talk to me anytime or keep your eyes open as you go through your educational journey here at OU, and we can get that under your belt if you'd like to. All right, so we're going to start off our international, which is chapter 18. So don't be freaked out that we're jumping chapters on you right away. So we do go to the middle. So this is international econ. All right, so I love international economics because it's so powerful at reducing poverty around the world. If we can just increase trade, it doesn't take intervention of international aid programs and some other things, which have been in large part disasters over the period of time, especially the last 40 years. And so this is kind of cool. So we can kind of think of reasons for trade. Why do countries trade with each other? So one reason would just be to get something that they can't make, right? So get a good that cannot be made in your country. So it's pretty tough to grow, for example, oranges in Canada. The Canadians up north would have some trouble growing oranges on a large scale. It's way better for them to buy oranges from other countries. So when they're buying something from another country, when Canada buys oranges, is that an import or an export for Canada? It's an import, right? So oranges in Canada, imports are purchases of goods and services from another country. And we say country, but usually it's a business in a country, right, or a person in a country. So it's usually not like what do we mean by the country? Well, it's something to do with that country. It could be the government, but more likely it's just a business that's operating in that country. All right, and exports then are the sale. So the Canadians say, hey, we'd like to get some oranges from you. We've got this great Labatt's Blue. It's the best beer you've ever tried, and we'll trade you some beer for some oranges, right? And so they export. So exports are sales of goods and services, which I'll maybe for shorthand do G and S here. Sales of goods and services to another country. All right, so that's one reason to trade. But what else could we be doing to trade? Anybody else got any other reasons we could trade? So you just can't do oranges. So you want some oranges. What else? Why would countries trade with each other? Nadia?
They have an excess.
Good. Okay, they have an excess. So they're maybe good at what they do, right? So number two, a reason for trade is they are a low-cost producer. In other words, they are good at making something. They are a low-cost producer and have a surplus of that good to sell cheaply to the rest of the world. So I'll use this shorthand notation also, calling the rest of the world row. So the country of row means basically everybody outside my country, the rest of the world. Okay, and so I'll move over here since that's getting a little low. So kind of the key point here is that it would be smart, it is smart for a country to export goods that they have a cost advantage and trade for goods. They are a high cost producer. So again, kind of with our oranges example, you could imagine building greenhouses and other things to make oranges in Canada. But those oranges are going to be super expensive compared to the basically almost naturally growing oranges down in Florida and California and some of the warmer climates. And so this is something smart for a country to do. And it doesn't mean they can't produce the good, like reason number one was. It's just that it's smart for them to do that. So a country has comparative advantage when they can do something relatively cheaper than other countries. So all countries have a comparative advantage. A comparative advantage in some good. That's a claim we'll kind of prove here. I just wanted to get it on the board. All countries have a comparative advantage in some good and will therefore find international trade beneficial. A comparative advantage comes about from countries being different. So you can imagine from my oranges example from Canada, hopefully you can start to identify some of these differences in countries. How do countries differ from each other? So give me some examples, just kind of brainstorm a few of them here, a handful of examples. You guys know different countries around the world?
Yep.
What do you got over here? Let's go to the back of the room. How about back row? Pressure's on back row. This is an easy softball question. You guys are softball players, aren't you? This is a softball question. Give me an example of how countries differ. What they eat. Okay, so that might be the preferences of the country, right? So differences in preferences. So there could be cultural differences maybe. So differences in culture, which might mean, you know, what they eat. This one's pretty wide-reaching. I mean, we could do religion. So that might play in, that was kind of what came to mind with what they eat. So whether they eat meat or not, if you go to India, Hindus are vegetarians. So what they eat, religion, so you know, customs and traditions. What does Christmas look like, you know, in different countries around the world? Does it look the same as it does in the United States? Well, we might not be able to export Santa Claus quite as well to certain countries, right? Okay, good. What else? And Simon, I heard climate. That's a good one. So that was kind of teed up with the oranges example. So with climate, you know, can we make oranges? Guatemala has fabulous coffee. So having the right climate to grow coffee and other things in different places around the world. All right, what else is different about countries? Yeah, give me your name.
Justin.
Justin.
Like landscape, like what your ground looks like.
Okay, so the actual physical land, right? So climate could be into the big land category, but so are you thinking like whether it's mountains or flat or stuff too, or?
That, but also like there's sand, like areas you can't really.
Yeah. Okay, so let's use your word here, landscape, and then we'll just put, you know, sand, mountains, fertile soil, and then I went to Antarctica over the break and learned that some of it just has ice, right? So ice. Antarctica. Okay, I can't spell that. Antarctica. All right, so, and basically nobody lives in Antarctica anyway, so that doesn't really matter too much, but you go up to Canada in different parts and you have snow most of the time, so we can put snow here. All right, good. What else differs between the countries? Yeah? Their government, very good. I was hoping somebody was going to get to that one. So, the government. You know, with the government, do they pursue, you know, individual versus communal property rights? Communal usually meaning government property rights, and I'll just put government up here. So government ownership of property or individual, the law of the land. So we got police and courts. Are they corrupt? Can you call a number and expect the police to be there in a timely fashion? So that's kind of the rule of law, is what the law of the land, rule of law. What does the government do with the money? So do they have a sound money supply? We'll be talking about that in later chapters. What kind of currency do they use? And does the government do things responsibly so that we avoid inflation, regulations, occupational licensing? So in general, we call all of that stuff institutions. So with culture, we usually have some amount of what we call civil society. So I'm going to list that one separately, but it could fall into culture. But I want to make a distinction here between public government rule of law stuff that's by law and something we call civil society. Civil society is voluntary associations among citizens. So this could be churches, nonprofits, you know, the VFW, youth sports. You know, do we have lots of opportunities for youth to join the soccer program? All kinds of stuff kind of falls into that. You just want to think of stuff that the government didn't start, right? It's not government initiated stuff. It's stuff that people have voluntarily chosen to do. And it might be for-profit, it could be non-profit. So a lot of that stuff will usually be more on the non-profit side. But civil society, how do people relate with each other? All right, well that's pretty good. That's a pretty good list here. So we got definitely a lot of differences among countries. And what I like about international trade is that that's the only assumption we need, is to have countries be different. So the key point with all this is that there are gains from trade, assuming countries are different. So sometimes in economics we make some crazy assumptions to get maybe the results that we want or the way we think the world works. In this one, it's easy peasy, right? We've got differences in countries are obvious. We just listed a bunch of them. We could probably spend some time squeezing out a few more. But now we got to prove up this gains from trade. So I just made a claim, and now I want to prove it up. So this is a claim, and let's kind of show how that could come about. So we're going to build the economic model called the Ricardian trade model. So it was named after David Ricardo, which has its own story, but he made this claim trying to get the King of England to trade with the lowly Frenchman. So he was French, and in the early 1800s, he goes to the King of England and says, "Oh, King, I know you're great at everything, but please let me show you why you should be trading some of your chickens for our wine. And so he tried to make the claim like, let's trade with each other, because at that time things were more, let's keep the borders, you do your thing, I do my thing, and maybe we'll go to war once in a while. And so Ricardo wanted to make a plea to the king to that. So this is what we're going to do. We've got two countries, the USA and Japan. We got two goods, cars and food. We've got one resource, labor. And for that resource, the US has a labor force in the USA of 2,000 people, whereas Japan is smaller at 1,000. So we got two countries, different sizes. And that is their breakdown. And then the other thing we're going to look at is the productivity of their workforce. So what do we mean by productivity? If you are more productive than your roommate at learning, how would you describe that? How would you describe you being more productive with learning than your roommate? Yeah.
Getting more.
And what did I want to say, Justin?
Yeah.
Okay. Whew.
Getting more things done in X amount of time.
Okay, good. Yeah, getting more things done in X amount of time. So that's a easy way to look at it, so that we're just going to have more done in a given amount of time or for a given amount of resources. So it could be for our company, Nick is more productive at making apples than Russ. What does that mean? Well, in a given hour, Nick can make 100 apples and I can make 80, right? So there's more units of output per units of input. All right, so that's what we're going to do here for our countries. We're going to make a little table. And so we're going to have the USA and Japan. And we're going to be measuring our food and cars. So in the USA, we've got an American being able to make 4 units of food per unit of labor. Each person can make 4 units of food per unit of labor. Or if we have that person working in cars, they can do 8 cars per unit of labor. So that's their productivity, the number of cars per person. In Japan, the Japanese can do 5 units of food per unit of labor. Or a Japanese person can do 25 cars per unit of labor. What can you tell me about these two countries in terms of productivity? Looking at that data. What?
Japan is more productive than us in general?
Yeah, in general, or for both goods, right? So an average Japanese person can outdo an American in food and really outdo an American in cars, right? So from this information, we would say that the Japan has an absolute advantage in production. So, since Japan is better at both goods. In terms of productivity, Japan has an absolute advantage in production. So it begs the question, why would the Americans ever want to trade with Japan? So why would why would the Japanese, I reversed that, I don't know if I said it right the first time. Why would the Japanese ever want to trade with the lowly Americans? Fat, lazy, heart disease, diabetes. Why would the Japanese ever want to trade with the Americans? So this is the pitch that Ricardo made back to the King of England. And he kind of set the stage this way. Notice I would have made it easy, right? If I would have said that the Japanese can only do 4, then it would have been kind of obvious, like, oh, you make cars, I make food. So this is really stacking the deck, right? So I'm intentionally stacking the deck so that we've got the hotshot Japanese that are better at everything. Why would they have incentive to trade with the Americans? So that's what we got going on here with this. So what we want to do is graph this out. So let's get some graphing goggles on. We're going to put 2 graphs side by side. So the graph to the left is the Americans. So you can put USA here and Japan to the right. And what I want to do is graph their production possibilities. So the production possibilities, and now I have to check. I feel like I should have this down. We either call it the frontier and they call it the curve, I think. Oh, for crying out loud. I always hated it when professors weren't consistent with what the textbook called it, so that's why I try to do that for you guys. And I'm almost positive it's the curve. All right. Oh, there it is. I found it. Gosh, I just have to left it. The curve rather than the frontier. So we call it the PPC instead of the PPF. So the production possibilities curve shows the maximum combination of 2 goods an economy can produce, shows the maximum combination of 2 goods an economy can produce given its available resources and technology. Shows the maximum combination of 2 goods an economy can produce given its available resources and technology. All right, so we've been giving our resources with this problem, and then we've got these 2 goods, each country. So what is the maximum amount of cars that the USA can produce? So we're going to put cars on the vertical axis. Food, so we're not dealing with prices, so beware, we're not doing supply and demand where this is prices up here. These are quantities of cars and quantities of food. And then the other little shorthand notation that we do for international trade is that the foreign country, since we're in the United States now, we're going to call Japan the foreign country. The foreign country's numbers, we're just going to put a little asterisk by. And so the asterisk denotes the foreign country. So that way we can come over here and we can put C star and F star. We'll just put a little star so that when we're looking at things, we can keep the two countries clear with the production. So back to my question now. What's the maximum amount of cars the United States could produce? Where do they max out? I think Jesse's got it right. What is the back of the room here? And I know Simon's probably got it right because he's a smart guy and he's going to give him good answers. So somebody other than Simon. Alex? You're pretty smart too, aren't you? Where's Alex? Or is it just because you're rubbing next shoulders to Simon? All right, good. Now 8. How'd you get 8? 8 is correct. 8's almost correct. I got to be careful. But I'm going to help you out. Why 8? Okay. So 8 is here, but that's not quite the right answer. How many cars can we produce knowing that one American can produce 8 cars? How much can the country produce? How much? I think I heard somebody whispering that's not very brave. Justin? 8 times 2,000, 16,000. Some people are clicking here, right? So we're looking at the whole country. We got 2,000 people that can all, on average, produce 8 cars. And so we are at 16 here. So if we kind of, we'll try to do a little bit careful here. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. So if we devote all resources, all 2,000 people, to the production of cars in the United States, we could have 16,000. So cars are being measured. I put a 16 up there, but let's put a little thing here that we're measuring cars in thousands. We're measuring food in thousands. So that's 16,000. If we devote all of our resources to food production, how much can we have? Somebody other than the people who spoke? You should have the easy one now. Back to softball. 8,000. Good. So we have 4 units of food on average per person. We got 2,000 people. 4 times 2 is 8. So 2, 4, 6, 8. So 8,000. All right, challenge question. What if we split them up? 1,000 people on cars and 1,000 people on food. Where are we at? How much of each good? 1,000 people devoted to car production and 1,000 people to food production. What are we making then?
8,000 cars and 4,000.
Good, 8,000 cars and 4,000 food. So 1,000 on here gives us 8,000, 1,000 on here gives us 4,000, and so at 4 and 8, that's another production possibility. And then we can be anywhere in between. If you drew this really carefully, which mine's not real careful, you should have a straight line here. So I'm going to cheat a little bit. I wish I would have done a little better, but I see how my vertical axis kind of bends over. That's not cool for, but it'll work for TV here. So, all right, but if you drew it really careful, it's a straight line, right? There's always this trade-off of I can give up, put some people on food, which means I'm going to give up some cars. So now we're really highlighting the trade-off between cars and food. All right, what about the Japanese? If they devote all their people to car production, how much can they produce? 25,000. So all 1,000 people in Japan being devoted to car production gives us 25,000. So let's go 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. And if we devote all 1,000 people to food production, 5,000. So then we go 5. We don't have to have the scale perfectly. Let's just make that a 5. You can if you want. Or if we split people up, we could be anywhere in between. And so this now is the production possibilities. The PPC. It's not really a curve, but it is in real life, for reasons we won't tackle in this class. I think that's why we call it the frontier, then it doesn't matter if it's curved or not. But so this is the production possibilities curve in Japan. Let's put a little asterisk by it. This is the production possibilities in the United States. Okay, let me pause there. Any questions so far? We got more to build on, but it's important for you to have these basics down at this point. Yeah?
So like the only reason that I can like pass the PPC is if I trade.
Okay, good, yeah. Is if you, and what did you say, if you
I
what?
would like to go like to pass the PPC.
Yeah.
And I like to trade.
Okay, so first of all, for their production possibilities, it's impossible to be at a point outside. But yes, once we get to that, we'll be able to maybe get outside. If you're jumping ahead, sounds like your mind is going in the direction we're going to go. But it's not with production. So what I'm emphasizing here is what is possible for my country. This country cannot get outside here. Now, could they be inside?
Yes.
Yes. So it's a production possibility to be inside, which shows an inefficiency, right? So they're not using all the resources, or something's not working, because they could be out on the edge, and they're not. And so being on the edge shows a maximum production efficiency. Being outside is just not possible. Okay, anything else? All right, so now we got to figure out, well, what's the cost? So opportunity cost is one of the top principles of economics. And so that's what we're going to do next here, is calculate that. So the opportunity cost of producing one food in the US is what? What would you say is the cost of a food? We don't have dollars here, of course. So what is the cost of a food? Jesse?
2 cars.
2 cars. How'd you get it?
Because 4 is 8 divided by 2.
4 is 8 divided by 2, yes. But did we just kind of pluck those numbers out of the air?
No.
Okay. Can you lay it out a little better?
Alright.
You're on the right track.
I can't remember, because this is like what we did in the first chapter of Macroeconomics.
It is, yep. We're doing the same thing.
For every 1 car they make,
I liked your 8 and 4 better. Can anybody use 8 and 4? You just hold tight here. Simon? That's what Jessie said. So she said just do 8 divided by 4. I want you to explain why is 8 divided by 4 the right answer. That's important for everybody to kind of get it.
So each like 2 cups that I can make, I made like 1 food.
Say that again?
So each like 2 cups that I made 1 food.
Yes, okay, you're talking the right thing there, but I want to use the 8 and the 4. So let me try it with you this way. So in the United States, so let's put a little note down here. I'm going to write it down here. Note, in the USA, for food, is equal to 8 cars, in a sense. And I think this is what some of you were getting at with this trade-off. One person can do fork food, or one person can do 8 cars. So in terms of productivity, you can think of it as 4 food is equivalent to 8 cars, or 4 food can be traded, or how about 4 food costs me 8 cars? You with me on that? That gets more at the trade-off where Amal was going. 4 food cost me 8 cars. Does that make sense in terms of the trade-off? Because if I'm doing one, I can't do the other. That's kind of the heart of the opportunity cost, right? So I don't want the cost of 4 food. I want the cost of 1 food. How do I get a 1 over here? Divide by 4. What I do to one side of the equal sign, to be fair, mathematically, I got to do to the other side of the equal sign. And there we've got 8 divided by 4 equals 2. And it's 2 cars, right? So 1 food, all we've done here is 4 divided by 4 is 1. 1 food, 8 divided by 4 is 2. We broke it down to a single unit. 1 food equals 2 cars. All right, any questions on that? I'm going to give you some more practice, so it's probably not a big deal if you got a question. All right, so what is the opportunity cost of producing 1 food in the, oh wait, we'll get rid of the, in Japan? What does it cost to make a food in Japan?
5 cars.
5 cars, good. So once we start to get the trick here, now you can use this, or let me try it with you graphically this time. Everybody agree that this is a production point? A, let's just call it A. And this country could move from A to B. B is another production point. Yes? So those are both production possibilities. So I could have 25 cars and 0 food, or that's equal to the 5 food in Japan. Let's put some F stars and C stars up here. I don't want the cost of 5 food, I want the cost of 1 food. Divide by 5, divide by 5. 1 food in Japan is equal to 5 cars. So the cost of a food is 2 cars in the US. The cost of a food is 5 cars in Japan. Who's better at making food? Who's better at making food? The US is. How'd that happen? The Japanese were better at both things.
Opportunity cost.
Once we analyze the internal trade-offs here, we got the USA has a comparative advantage in food. That means they are the low-cost producer in terms of what they have to give up. All right, we'll wrap it there and pick it up tomorrow.